this thing started. How's everyone doing today? Having a good day so far? Yeah. Everyone's falling asleep from those super hearty sandwiches, right?
That's right.
Well, cool. I'm excited to be here. Very happy. Thanks to BSides for having me. Great conference today. I hope everyone's enjoying it as much as I have been. So, several of you know me, so I'm telling you what you may already know, but I've been working in technology for about 15 years, and most of my background, I've been working with technology companies. And it's funny, back when the internet was young, back in the 90s, well, kind of the cool nerdy thing to do with open source was screw around with security. A lot of our early security tools come from open source, between Snort, Tripwire. Many of them have closed source since, but that's partly how I ended up in information security, running technology for internet services and stuff like that. Since then, I've been working with high-growth technology organizations, really the past decade or so, to Checkout for nearly 9 years, and Cover My Meds for the past few years. At those two places, I built their security programs and a lot of their early tech platform. In the case of Cover My Meds, I built the technology team, not too many hands on the keyboard except with the security program there. And really what I do is help technology teams or technology companies scale their tech and teams. We're growing fast at Cover My Meds, as many know. So really what this presentation is about security automation, DevOps, and building software. How many folks here actually write software as part of their primary responsibilities? Yeah, I expected 2 hands, maybe 3. Often this presentation is given to more software engineers, so I start talking security stuff and they give me blank stares. I think this presentation is a bit better suited for this audience, so that works out well. So of you who are security folks, how many of you are responsible for parts of security that deal with applications? Okay, cool. So you're in the right place. That's good. I'm glad to hear it. So we're going to talk about how to use automation to build secure software. So really, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to prevent software from being vulnerable by accident. We're trying to keep applications up and resilient. The conversations I have with a lot of software engineers, everyone likes to think of me as a security guy. And really, I think of myself just as much as an operations guy, because secure software, secure platforms, help these platforms stay available, right? Because if a system's compromised, it's just as likely to become unavailable, go down, as it is to have data lost in the process. And a big part of how security is traditionally approached, especially when it comes to software, is paperwork and separation of duties and stuff like that. And the whole approach, that philosophy, is really a distrust of people. And in really large organizations, many of us might work for banks or insurance companies, being in the Columbus metro area, that's a pretty good philosophy, because if you have thousands of contractors or consultants, and there's some cultural challenges with how these resources, these folks are involved in the organization, well, they're a pretty weak link from a security perspective. With the organizations I work with, technology companies, we look at our employees as one of our competitive advantages. We employ the best engineers, the best talent, and we treat them really well. So we don't necessarily look at our employees as our weakest link. I was meeting with a dude who built a product that's essentially Witness, if anyone remembers Witness, but Witness on steroids. So it's endpoint protection for workstations. And the whole value prop about it is that it has visibility and controls every facet of somebody's computer. And he's been trying to sell me his product for years now, and I'm like, dude, I don't need that. And that's not the problem I have. And he didn't really get it until I gave him a tour of our office at Cover My Meds. And then he's like, okay, now I see why you're not too worried about your employees, because you're actually nice to them.
Beer will do that.
Yeah.
It's
Beer
true.
non-hostile work environments.
Yeah.
So the DevOps part of this, the whole concept behind DevOps is development and operations folks working together. If any of you caught my InfoSec Summit presentation last year, a big part of what we talked about is how DevOps is just as much about security and enabling more security in an organization as it is about technology. So in DevOps circles, there's this whole thing about horses and unicorns, right? That's how we end up with the image with a flaming horse and a unicorn, right? That doesn't happen by accident. Horses in DevOps circles are traditional organizations, large corporations that have been around a long time, traditional corporate cultures. And unicorns are like the younger, spry tech companies who don't have mainframes and a ton of technical debt. At least that's the theory behind the concept. And a big part of what's been happening in the DevOps circles over the past few years is talking about how horses can adopt these practices well. Because DevOps is really about a culture of collaboration and using tools and practices to enable automation and working together. And my thing is, as security practitioners, we should be a part of that. And we should be working with the dev and ops folks and helping build these secure platforms. When things go wrong with security, people often go to what they know. If it's an engineering manager or a systems administrator, a systems engineer, what do we do when something breaks? Well, we're going to do what we know fixed that thing in the past. And an example of that is if we suddenly have a bunch of availability challenges, we might want to stop making changes or start making changes slower. And a lot of what's being proven, and I say proven because there's science and data to support this, is that in the DevOps circles, small frequent changes made frequently build more secure and reliable platforms. There's a survey, a PhD collected the data, and there are a lot of the data points are correlations, but there's causation for some of them as well. It's Puppet's State of DevOps survey. And there's some really neat data there. And they've been doing it every year for the past 3-4 years, give or take. Don't quote me on that. I'd recommend you check it out. So what do we do when development keeps on putting in secure code into production and showing up in our vulnerability assessments or internal scanning? Shoot, external scanning shows another cross-site scripting vulnerability. Folks should know better than to write cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. So what do? We slow that process down. We add more checks and controls in the software development process for us to feel more confident about vulnerabilities not being introduced, or at least being less likely to be introduced. So in the end, it might be a lightweight process where somebody has to approve it or you have to have a peer review. If it's using ITIL change management practices, over time, that might start to get ahead of its own. I built a really light change control process once upon a time, many years ago. I got to watch this process evolve over years with many different people involved in the organization, different management, different executives. And this really lightweight process in a technology organization turned into this stack of paperwork. So this stack of paperwork was a list of every files in a change in an application deployment change. And the software engineer had to initial every line item along with the QA person. And then on the last page, there was a block, and you needed to have half a dozen signatures. Product owner, development manager, infrastructure manager, probably an executive too. It was absurd. So a simple change in a technology organization that needed to respond quickly to market changes would take a week. And that was on a good day. So now we have really slow changes, and we feel a little more confident. Oh, our stuff's not going to break as frequently. Instead, we end up building up all these changes because people don't want to go through the process. And it starts to look like a waterfall software development process, if not being waterfall by design then. So you have a big pile of changes, and in the end, stuff breaks anyway. It's signed off, it's going to be okay. No, not really. I'm sure we've all experienced that firsthand, right? Yeah, I see a fair amount of heads nodding. It's never a fun time. So the idea is small frequent changes and catch those failures up front. Or if it does fail, automate and roll back really quickly. In some small organizations, right, the organization I exampled, I've heard in other young companies as well, where if it's a startup or a young company, suddenly they think they have to grow up. And if it's an industry where all their peers do that really slow stuff, they might, well, it's what we know, right? We have to grow up now. Let's do what everyone else is doing. Doesn't have to be that way. So this is a photo from DevOps Days, Ohio. We learned about unicorns and horses earlier. Well, at DevOps Days, Ohio, we had a unicorn. That's Clinton Wolf from OmniTI. He doesn't know this isn't my presentation. I'll probably tell him after I've given it a couple more times. He wasn't too excited about being hugged on stage. So unicorns want to be friends, right? Unicorn, that's Stephanie. She's hanging out with Clinton up there. She's friendly. We don't have to slow down. And we don't have to have 1 million people sign off on things. There really isn't necessarily a universal solution. I think it's more a set of principles, ideas, concepts, and looking for ways to do things not necessarily slower, not introducing controls for the sake of controls, but figuring out ways to reduce that risk, yet not slowing an organization or a process down. Usually what I do is I won't go into an organization with any preconceived notions. I'll try and understand how they're working, how they're doing things, and try and put that in a meaningful context. Because, I don't know, if I walked into Ford tomorrow and said, oh, that stuff you guys are doing, it sucks. We have to DevOps it. Nobody's going to listen to that. And besides, that's not going to work anyway. I do think there are some things that work pretty well in many environments, and that's what we're going to talk about now. We get to stare at Shea LaBeouf for a while, because I don't like making slides as much as I like telling stories. So apologies in advance for that. And really, the idea is look at how an organization is building software. And I hope there's parts of it that are automated, or at least parts that are taking an extra look about what things are being done. And look for ways to embed security in every stage of the process. Even in the most traditional organizations, there might be peer reviews, maybe under a different name. If there's a code review or a code review checklist or whatever version of that, make sure security is a part of it. But really, I think the best solution is to automate it. Automate the builds. Features being planned, make sure security is part of that planning process. If it's an agile environment, make sure that part of the story planning includes security. And working closely together with the engineering team helps them learn too. It's like a grassroots awareness program. And I'll tell you what, engineers are going to be a lot more responsive to a peer giving advice earlier in the process than they are sitting through yet another hour-long presentation that's really boring. Some of the more, well, I'll say that differently. Agile's been getting a lot of traction in Columbus for a while now. So there's more organizations in Columbus that use tools like continuous integration tools and continuous delivery tools, be it Jenkins, Hudson's an older version of that. Are folks here familiar with CI? Wow, a few hands. Okay, cool. Normally I breeze over this because software engineers are like, why are you talking about this? I don't want to hear about it. So the neat thing about CI, right, it can be used not only for automating builds and automating testing. It depends, right, how far someone wants to go with it. It can be as far as being the actual deployment tool, or at least the final stage before scripts are run to deploy software. Really what's neat about it is it's a central platform where automation can occur. And traditionally it's a lot of test automation. Different types of testing. It can be regression testing, wrong word there, and stuff like that. But this is a platform where security automation can go. In every language there's security automation tools. And there's key areas to look. And cross-site scripting, I really want to think it's like buffer overflows. We've solved that thing. But I tell you what, every app pen test I have run still has a ton of cross-site scripting vulnerabilities. In the world we have now on the internet, that's a way bigger risk because it's a risk for our users. And if our users are compromised and they see our company's branding on it, it doesn't matter that it is a client issue if our users are seeing our branding and having their data stolen. In Ruby and Java and probably .NET, don't quote me on that, there's all sorts of tools that do scanning for input validation. And frameworks as well, not even just scanning. You can embed frameworks in the applications that are being built to help with input validation, not only on the client side, but also into the database as well. So a lot of the OWASP top 10 can be addressed by frameworks. And if we work with the development teams and get those frameworks embedded into all the applications and software they built, that's a huge win. And then we can use CI tools and scan for, do static analysis, be it Veracode, which is a commercial solution, but it works for .NET and Java, binary compiled software. And there's all sorts of different open source scanning tools for Ruby and the different languages as well. And in addition to that, a really big challenge that we're only starting to recognize. I say that, and it blows my mind, right? 15 years ago in Perl, we had a ton of modules, CPen, repository, all these libraries and modules. And they had all sorts of dependencies. And if these libraries are using an old version, that might have a vulnerability. Well, we didn't learn our lesson from 15 years ago. Now we have Ruby, and we have Node, which is even worse. Not only is it embedding old versions of stuff in software that's being distributed, it's dependencies on those libraries. So it has this huge dependency tree, and software can be distributed and packaged using a bunch of old gems and libraries and modules. That's no good for anyone. Fortunately, we have tools that we can embed in our CI platforms to scan for these things. And the neat thing, in organizations that use CI, it's called breaking the build, right? So you'll have all this automated scanning, and it'll be green, yellow, or red. Well, if that stuff turns red, it breaks the build, and you can't deploy. At least in a healthy organization, if the platform's built well, you can't deploy if it's broken. So if we have security tools in the CI tool that tells developers they can't deploy if it's broken, we're building a lot more secure software. And it's automated. It's not a manual code review process. But if we do have those, we should have security considered as part of it as well. We've been talking about not deployment automation as much. We've been talking about more security scanning within deployment automation. Addressing deployment automation specifically, we should be automating deployments, because that's valuable for the engineering teams. It's valuable for security. If we have automated deployment, we can have the configurations and the security settings standardized within that automation. So we know that every application that's deployed shares that secure standard. And we can have that standard in revision control. So guess what? We're going to have a history with an audit trail. If it changes, we're going to know who changed it. And we can use that deployment automation to serve as code reviews as well. A lot of the more process-oriented parts of a code review, even outside of the more technical configuration, can be embedded in that deployment automation. And the manual review only happens if something's flagged there. And if all the code review, even if it's a manual review, is tied within the revision control system or those automation tools, you have a record of that. So again, an audit trail. And when we're working with software engineers earlier in the process, we can have conversations with them about the things we all need, between hooks for monitoring, centralized logging, actually logging things we care about, when records are modified, when things are accessed. It still baffles me. I've seen that software can still be built without those things if someone's not given guidance. Might be a really smart person, but if they only have a couple years of experience out of college, they might not know that logging, or even having unique identity associated with every person who accesses an application, is a pretty important thing to do. So these are all things we can enforce, not only in the planning session, when applications start to be built, but we can also enforce that in the automation tools. The ideal case would be to maybe have a library, and if the security team in your organization doesn't necessarily have the software expertise to build something like that, those are the kind of things we can find partners with in the other parts of the organization. As we build that culture of collaboration, collaborating between operations and development and security, we can work together and build a library that has secure logging standards. And every application we build in the organization from that point forward can use that library. So we standardized the security configuration in the applications that we need going forward. And I mentioned security frameworks earlier. And the security frameworks are already built. But if we have special requirements or things that we'd like to see in our organizations that aren't in that framework, we could add on to it or create a new one and open source it, because it makes everyone better. And the neat part about all of this, we started a couple slides ago talking about a big pile of paperwork, right? Because that makes us more secure and safe. Everything we've talked about is the equivalent to that big pile of paperwork. And if it's automated every step of the way, you deploy that app. You have a record of all of that, and you have stronger controls than printing out some stuff and signing off on it, even though somebody could potentially bypass the system. And the neat part is, this can empower the teams without taking away their access. Well, let me rephrase. It can empower the teams, but we can take away their access to the systems and the databases because they're just empowered, as empowered. And if it's really high risk, we can have an exception process and maybe be a little more manual about that particular part of the environment. And that's the really neat part about all of this, is we don't have to have separation of duties. Developers can deploy to production, but it doesn't necessarily mean having direct access to production. So we might not have the traditional control that we're used to seeing, separation of duties. There's a release coordinator, or there's somebody who deploys to prod who's not the developer, that developer can deploy to prod, and it's all there and recorded. And it enables an organization to be faster. That's improving speed of market. I can tell you what, if you tell your executive team that you can improve the security in the platform, but improve speed to market at the same time, that's going to be really, really compelling to them. But we don't want to forget about the basics. OWASP top 10 is always important. Input validation, etc., but we can use libraries to enable that. Cryptography. Encrypting in transit and at rest. This slide is more for the developers I typically talk to. They might forget about encrypting. It's kind of important. I'm sure the 3 folks here who raised their hands, you wouldn't forget though, because you're hanging out with us today. We all know encryption's important here. Logging, but again, we've standardized that in the way we build software. And then access and identity. Even though we've automated most of this, automated the way we deploy software, automated the way we test software, and the ways we configure and build secure software, we need to be considerate of our environment and what works for us, and not completely disregard documentation in the way we work. I wouldn't say creating a big pile of archaic printed out documentation that is out of date as soon as we print it off, but be aware of what works and what has worked for the organization and align that to everything we've done today. And we've been very focused on the way we build software here. We can't forget about all the things around the software as well. Because security in layers means we have things like web application firewalls helping on the egress points. And pen testing, and internal and external scanning, so we're keeping ourselves accountable. If something sneaks by us, it's going to raise a flag in a different part of our security program. And I mentioned earlier that, well, we all know this, right? How boring is it to sit through the same training every year? And it's something I always hate to do when it comes to software engineers and operations folks and stuff like that. Because they're smart folks. And they're highly skilled and compensated accordingly. So we sit 20 of those folks in a room for an hour, they're falling asleep, and it costs a ton for the company. There's some really neat tools out there, like Scarab, which is a tool that OWASP built and open sourced. And it's a tool that gamifies basically breaking, penetrating applications. So it'll have all these different kinds of vulnerabilities. And the goal is for somebody to take advantage of that vulnerability. And once it's compromised, a token is acquired, and the token is input into Scarab. So you get points for it. We've introduced that at Cover My Meds, and it's not a huge install, but we have parts of the software team who are competing, breaking software on this test platform. It's a really neat tool. I lost a few hours to it myself one day because it was fun, right? That is so much more educational than sitting someone in a room for an hour. And they're going to be a lot more interested in it as well. It may not address all of our compliance requirements as an organization, but it might allow us to streamline the compliance training and then provide additional resources so folks learn a lot more. And ultimately, that's going to help us be more secure in our companies. So even if you go back to your office and you might not be able to add your scanning to your CI tool if you already have one, or if you don't have one, suddenly build one, you can look for opportunities to collaborate with your development teams and operations teams. And the neat part is, CI is a huge win for us from a security perspective, but it's a huge win for software engineers because it automates testing. It automates the parts of building software that may not be as fun to do. So they're going to want that. The ops folks are going to want it too because it standardizes the way software is deployed and tested and introduced to production. So those sorts of tools are really a win for everyone involved, even if it is not necessarily on your technology roadmap, if that's something your companies do. I'll bet if you work with your peers across the organization, they're going to have a lot of interest in it as well. And that can be used to introduce those tools to the organization over time. Any questions? Sir?
Sorry, how do you handle situations where the sales team is driving your deployment cycle instead of your software developers?
Well, it's important to, provide value to the business, right? And we're talking about speeding up change. And what this does is increases the speed of a feature getting to production. So that it benefits the sales cycle. It's a huge win because if more changes can be made more frequently, that's going to get features faster to production. And I'll tell you what, if you look across the business landscape right now and look at the organizations that are most successful, they are good at making change, they are good at building technology, and they're making that change fast. And they're getting a lot of traction in the market space and often surpassing more established competitors. So I'd say that they're not, the sales cycle isn't mutually exclusive to this and they complement each other well. Did you raise it? Other questions?
You've got to understand what's their motivation. In the end, the sales team wants to sell the software. If their software is harmful, nobody's going to buy it.
Mm-hmm.
But
You'd be surprised on that one?
yeah.
Yeah, very surprised on that one. When you mentioned that sometimes you have to slow down before you can start speeding back up and put the big stack of papers, how do you sell that portion, to slow it down and change gears to move to a more agile system than just, here we are, we're going to do DevOps today?
I wasn't saying that we have to slow down to speed up. What I was saying is that I understand that different organizations operate differently, and I wouldn't expect an organization that doesn't employ some of these practices already to implement them tomorrow, especially if they're a big organization. However, I'd say these things can be implemented as quickly as possible within your organization. I just wouldn't assume that. So my argument is not to slow down to speed up. It's to speed up as fast as you can in a way that makes sense for your organization. If we're talking, what I often talk about in more DevOps circles and stuff like that, because if we're talking about a horse, a more traditional organization, well, it's slow to change, and they're big organizations, so turn the ship or whatever metaphor we want to use. At that scale, we start looking more about organizational change practices and less about technology changes. So if we want to make a big change to a large organization, some proven models are create an R&D shop. If it's an organization really resistant to change, create a fully independent R&D shop and table flip and do everything new from a modern way in that part of the organization. But it has to be independent. And as that part of the organization produces and is more successful, that is something that will enable the justification for making change in the larger organization. That's happening right now at Cardinal Health. Cardinal Health built Fuse, and I was hanging out with a dude just last week who is part of the leadership team who is taking those practices and introducing them to the larger Cardinal Health organization. Now, and that's talking about big enterprise, right? Even in a large enterprise, or even if we don't necessarily, if we're not in the position ourselves to influence that level of change firsthand, we can do smaller versions of it. Even just small projects within a smaller team or within a department within the larger organization. If you show that defects are reducing, speed to production's reducing, your apps are more secure, and whatever metrics make sense in the way you build software make change in your organization, and there's a small team doing it, well, that success is going to get attention. So there's different ways, but it all comes back to that theme. Don't try and fight. Show how it works, and then everyone else will follow. Other questions? Sir?
So, when I've done this before, I mean, it's, I don't want to say easy, but it's all straightforward when you own sort of the development at your organization. What's your take on when your development is outsourced? Not essentially completely over the wall, but they're contractors that are in the building, right? So they necessarily they'll have their own process. You know, it may not be completely owned by one or the other. It's sort of like a partnership, but it's not as simple as we're going to instill this process and you're sort of getting it from them.
Well, ultimately, you're the paying customer.
Sure.
I mean, it might have to come down to contract renegotiation and redefining the terms of the relationship, right? But if finding the right partners in your organization who have influence over the relationship and control of the business agreement, and then finding ways to enable the introduction of those practices. In that case, it might even be simple, right? It could be as simple as, I want these changes really fast, and I need them to meet these security requirements, or whatever requirements. And if you can't meet this, I'm going to find someone else who can. I mean, that's the really simple version, right? Sure. It's a customer answer. But if it's more a partnership, I find ways to introduce those requirements in ways that make sense for the relationship.
I would say that passing those security requirements is probably part of their contract anyway. And speaking as someone who is a contract software guy, I would rather have help with those up front. The sooner you can fix them, because, hey, my build went right, I don't have to wait 3 months for the project to finish for you to tell me I need to rewrite it. I can move on to the next thing that much faster. So I think software guys love having instant feedback. So it's easy to sell to the teams. It may be, honestly, the management is, you find, is the harder channel to conquer.
For larger contract shops, you very rarely have a contract house. You usually have a couple.
Yeah.
So having those metrics are a great way to either, one, provide feedback, or two, help with negotiations, whether or not they're, hey, you have a higher defect rate than our other contract houses, we need to fix that. We need to either bring in your A team, or, hey, we're going to pay you less, or whatever that becomes.
A lot of the more successful service organizations in Columbus, Pillar, I don't really want to name names, but whatever, Pillar and some others, employ all these practices because they brand themselves as agile shops. One of their models is to take a team and put it in your organization to demonstrate how effective these are and use it to drive change within your overall technology organization. So Pillar, I call them out because I know they use CI, right? So a lot of these leading service organizations in Columbus are already employing some of these practices. So it's relatively easy to go to an organization like that and be like, hey, I know you're using CI. Let's put this stuff in it too.
Sure. Well, I've also seen where people are using CI, yet they ignore it, right? Where, builds are broken, but they don't care.
Oh, shoot.
Or you have people that use CI, and the second the build is broken, they're chasing people down, going to their cube like, why did you break the build? And they're fixing it immediately. So tools are one thing, but I think the underlying fundamental thing is really a culture change moving forward. development as a whole.
And that's why DevOps is culture first, right? It's not about the tools. I mean, sure, config management is pretty important because system automation and stuff, but if it's culture first and everything else is second to it. So if I call something being broken and ignoring it a fundamental culture and process challenge, right? And that's something that needs to be addressed head on. Sir?
Really glad you mentioned Node. How disruptive do you think Mean is going to be to the WASP's top 10? And before you answer, I'd like to applaud you for not tripping over yourself for 40 minutes, having that cable right underneath you.
Yikes. You said lean?
Mean. You mentioned Node. I was curious as to how disruptive you think Mean is going to be to the WASP's top 10.
I don't know what mean is. Can you be more specific?
Mongo, Express, Node, and Angular.
Oh, it's like the new school lamp.
Yeah, right.
Cool. And the question is how disruptive you think it's going to be to the OWASP top 10? You know, it depends on who I'm talking to, right? We have some significant challenges in containers, for example. We have significant challenge. Operations teams have always been security partners for years, right? At least the more functional organization. But now we have less experienced people joining operations teams who can go out and download modules for config management from Puppet Forge or other internet resources. The same is true of containers and stuff like that, pre-configured things. But it's not just configuration files, it's the entire stack for that service. So there are significant security challenges with those things, but I don't think they're new challenges. I like calling out Node because that dependency hell is taking an old challenge to an insane scale, and I don't think we fully realize that challenge yet. So I don't think any of these things are necessarily changing the OWASP top 10 per se, but are going to significantly influence the problems we need to address, or if we don't address them, they're going to get way worse. But to be a little more detailed, right, OWASP top 10 is super detailed, which I'm kind of discounting, right? It's cross-site scripting and stuff like that. One of our number one vulnerabilities in the 90s was buffer overflows. That's not really a challenge anymore. We solved that. If we do things well, like we talked about earlier, if we embed these security frameworks in the software we build, hopefully things in the OWASP top 10 go away. And probably, well, the top 10, there's always going to be a top 10, right? But it'll be different things in the top 10. But at least the top 10 we've had for a while hasn't changed fundamentally. But I look at our success and what we do. If we're successful, that will change because we're making things better.
It's basically the OWASP top 10 really hasn't changed since Perl was a thing.
Maybe that should be a goal for us, right? Let's change the OWASP top 10. That sounds like a good goal to me. Sir?
Not really a question, but I think you hit one of the common things you nail on the head is finding, as security teams, make sure we're working with the dev team to find our requirements for the process. Because you can't expect them to know our side of the house. But what you can influence is education of them and partnering so you're not perceived as the adversary that they trip over before they're right about to deploy, right? But instead a partner that they partner with. And also the big thing you hinted on is train your developers. If you're not going to train them, they're not going to figure it out by themselves. And like you said, make it fun, make it educational. You want to be nailing those defects when they're already in the code, or do you want them not to even put them in the code? Those are the things kind of looking back at, help me, and the one thing that was my team is partnering. And the other thing, which I think as security you have to figure out too, is how do you influence change in your organization? That's kind of bigger than this, but if you want to be a catalyst for positive security change, that's one thing that you have to solve off the bat. Is how do I curb that bad behavior, right? And how do I influence it into the positive? And how do I gain another stakeholder versus just pissing somebody off?
That's absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. Time for one more question.
Kind of got an off-the-wall one. Do you see the implementation of some of the more automated processes like the DARPA grant challenge level self-healing code creation coming into your guys' business market and being implemented so that it does provide you guys with self-healing, code review that does the actual, not bad. Unfortunately, IT, we kill jobs, so nobody wants to say that, but that's the reality. We automate people out of jobs, but is that being brought into your guys' market so that to improve the security of these applications so that it does provide? Do you see that coming in the market, or is that something they're like, throw holy water at it? I'm not in the software development market, so I apologize if that's an ignorant question.
Well, it's kind of early, right? Neural networks, however, are proliferating across all industries and are influencing things on a really detailed level. I forget what I was listening to the other day, but I didn't really think of it as neural networks. I just thought of it as advanced analytics. But when it comes down to it, a lot of the advanced analytics stuff we're talking about, we as a greater technology as a whole, is tied to stuff like that, neural networks and so forth. So, yes. and I mean, honestly, if we're going to be successful as professionals, as security professionals, if we're going to be successful as technology professionals, we're going to help our organizations get better. And the secret to it is working together. The tools we have available to us now are incredibly powerful. And if we work together as multidisciplinary teams, that might have some of us might be better at some things than others, but we're working together, we will build much better things, more secure, more available, get changes faster to market, and everyone's happy. And the thing is, if we do stuff like that, we're at a unique opportunity right now where Agile has gotten traction for a long time, where DevOps over the past 5 years has gotten a lot of attention, and there's organizations that are introducing their version of it to their technology strategy. If we align ourselves to those things, it is an opportunity for us to help our organizations be more effective and secure. So I do a lot of stuff in the community. That's what all these logos are. I organize Ohio Linux Fest, one of the largest Linux conferences in the country. We've been around 14 years now. I organize DevOps Days Ohio. We're on year 3 this year. Columbus07 Columbus. We're 5 years old. We meet monthly talking about things that are IT operations and security and database, all the IT things, technology things. We talk about them there. At Cover My Meds, we have a technology blog called Scarab. It's where we open source things we do that aren't core to our product, where we publish articles about the things we're doing and the events we're speaking at and attending. So check that stuff out. I hope to see some of you there. Thanks so much to Security BSides, organizers, speakers, sponsors, attendees. Thanks for coming and being here with me. I have stickers for all these things. And I have a few DevOps Days Ohio buttons left, if anyone's interested in those. Thanks so much for having me.